Most people feel stuck and isolated because they avoid the hard conversations that can bring healing. On Let's Get Real with Jenna Burris, we tackle life's challenges like motherhood, mental health, and relationships, so you can break free, find healing, and move forward. Because in order to heal, we have to get real. So pull up a chair and let's dive in. Hey friends, today's episode is one that I've been really looking forward to. If you've ever found yourself living a life that looks good from the outside, but inside you feel like you've disappeared, this conversation is for you. My guest is Eileen Noyes, a wife, mom, author, speaker, and host of the Unsidelined Life podcast. She's also the founder of Lady Bellator, a movement that equips women to rise above life's challenges and step fully into their God-given purpose. Eileen's story is powerful. She was once living what many would call a dream. Married to an NFL player, raising a big family, but behind the scenes, she was slowly losing herself. When her marriage ended unexpectedly and life unraveled, she had to rebuild her identity from the ground up. But this isn't just a story about loss. It's a story about faith, healing, and reclaiming your voice when life has sidelined you. When I read her book, Sidelined No More, I felt like she was putting words to what I and so many other women have felt. What it's like to shrink or silence yourself in order to meet someone else's expectations. So wherever you're listening from, whether you're driving, folding laundry, or hiding in the pantry with a snack, I hope this feels like more than just encouragement. I hope it feels like a wake-up call, an invitation to get back in the game, to live the life that God intended for you, with your voice, your story, and your purpose fully alive. Let's jump in. Eileen, I am beyond excited to get to have this conversation. I've actually been really looking forward to this because you have a message to share. Your story is something that is going to resonate with so many people. So thank you so much for being here today. I just can't wait to get into this.
Yeah, this is the second time that we're going to actually talk in person, like seeing each other face to face. And then I don't even know how long we've
I know. Getting to be guests on each other's podcasts. Other than that, it's just voice memo and I don't get to see your face. So that's it. But I'm just so excited. I wanted to start out with reading a couple of lines from your book, Sidelined No More. And just because of these specific lines that really resonated with me the first time that I heard it. Yeah, so what you had said was, for the first time in a long time, after several moves in different states, I finally felt settled, found purpose, and had a sense of belonging. Yet all that changed in one day when I bought my one-way ticket to Green Bay, Wisconsin. I left everything I knew to marry my NFL husband. And then you went on to share how when you were in Green Bay, you had just gotten there and you were in this place of just not knowing anybody and you didn't have like a regular work rhythm or regular contact with people outside of your spouse, and how all of this happened at one time. And so during that, it was like this moment of a huge identity shift. And when I first heard that, read it, heard it, I remember where I was. Like I was taking a bath like I do at night. And I put on this book on Audible. So like when I heard those words, I remember this like almost like parting of clouds moment of this sense of, I have never heard anybody name what I've experienced like this. Like the way you were able to describe that, I was just like, I finally feel seen and I feel understood, because the experience of being in the NFL and living that life, there are so many struggles that come with it that very few people talk about. And I just remember being like, oh my gosh, like there's so many areas that have been wounded for me. And by you shedding light on this, it was really a huge part of healing from some of those experiences. Can you paint a picture of what your life looked like in San Diego before you went to Green Bay?
Yeah. Okay. So you had mentioned in that part in the book where like I felt like, for the first time in a long time, I felt, like I knew my purpose. So at San Diego State, I became a strength coach after playing, sports in college myself. I loved it. I felt like I found my niche after I came to know the Lord. So here I was a strength coach working with all these athletes, and then I got saved, and it just took it to a whole other level. I remember the chaplain saying, he came in, the football chaplain, and he says, you know what, you're the only coach that coaches all the athletes. All these coaches coach their specific teams. And I remember thinking, oh, okay, like, well, that's cool. And it hit me. And I was like, wow, God, you've put me in this position for a reason. And so it was not only for the physical strength and sports, it was literally like, God, thank you that you've put me in a position where I can share the gospel. I can pray for people. Like, for me, the passion to help women know their value, even back then, is because I didn't know mine. And so when God was in that point, in that season, helping me understand who I was in him, it just took it to a whole other level of just like sharing that with female and male athletes, taking them to church, again, praying for them in the weight room, doing Bible study. And so everything was there. I finally felt like I had a home. And so that's what life was. But out of obedience, long story short, but my ex used to play for San Diego State. That's where your husband played, right?
Yeah, which is the neat crossover.
Okay, yeah. So he was there. He got drafted to the Packers, and there's a story in this where he wasn't saved. He gets saved while he's there, and I just thought, okay, Lord, because I actually, God used me to share the gospel with him. So when he gets saved, I'm thinking, all right, my job is done. He can go on his way. I can go on mine. And that's a very condensed version. But God had other plans. And so out of obedience, like I said, I knew exactly when he said, it's time to go. And so I put my 2-week resignation in. And I got married mid-October. So it was during the middle of my, seasons with my teams. And it was in the middle of his season. And so I didn't, even jumping into the NFL world, I didn't get to have that intro women's, thing. It was, just jumping right into everything already in motion. So
yes,
it was definitely hard.
Very hard. Yeah. And even like what I'm hearing you say is because the purpose that you experienced, it was like beyond the role and the job that you had at San Diego State. It was seeing this opportunity of how God was moving, and you didn't know how that would be or what it would look like, but with the student athletes that you were working with, you were helping them physically get stronger and helping them perform even better in their sport, but you were also able to be used in their spiritual life and like leading them to that relationship that matters so much to you with Christ. So, and seeing that play out in the day to day, it's so challenging to then jump into a place where you don't know a soul, and your knight in shining armor you just got married to is hardly home, and it's a brand new place where you don't know where anything is. And then I didn't realize that you were there in October, because I know for me that his rookie year, it was so helpful to have the women's luncheon, because I remember going to like the preseason games before they had that and being like, I don't know anyone. Is it super awkward to go up and just ask if their spouse is playing? Like, how do I make friends?
Right.
And that's such a huge part of it. So, it's pretty, I think, jarring and like disorienting when you get into that and you leave the place where you had community, purpose, and passion. So, and like you said, that, it was really God leading you to say, okay, buy that one-way ticket. Like, I'm leading you to do this. And so, because that was something I was also curious about. I was like, what was it that gave you the courage to say yes to that?
Yeah. No, it was totally out of obedience. And I didn't realize then how important that would be to know, God, you're the one that said that. And I remember, when it was after training camp where he's like, we need to get married. This is too hard. And I said, I can't go unless I know for sure it's God, because if I go out of pressure, I'll, like when those times come, because they will come when it's hard, I'm either going to doubt, I'm going to resent you. And so I need to hear from God. And that has been so, I'm jumping ahead, but that's been so vital in my life to know, like, I need to hear God's voice. Like, I has to have that. Like, I can't I know when there's those places of doubt, and thank God, like, there's not major life decisions where I'm like, crap, I know I jumped the gun on that one. But like this one, when it came to this marriage, and both marriages, but when it came to this one, it's like, no, Lord, I know you're saying, like, it's time to go. You made it completely clear. So, I mean, that's been huge for me.
Yeah, that is so huge. And that takes a lot of maturity and discipline, like really discipline to not feed the flesh or not feed your desires and being like premature. Because even if that was ultimately what God was going to say, like you said, doing it from the motivation of pressure or, you know, being like, this is too hard, let's just jump in, it'd be really hard to maintain that sense of peace because of the timing, you know, and knowing that you've been sent, like he sent you to that, which is huge.
Yeah. Well, okay, I want to add this too. So it was we made the decision, it was right before 9/11, actually. And so here's another thing to it, which it just kind of plants a seed of my thinking. So 9/11 happens, you know, it's complete chaos. And he was put in a situation, well, it was really from the devil, like he almost cheated on me. So, you know, that day, it was a Tuesday and it's the day off, and he's just like, what do I do? Like, how do I, you know, you should be here and you're not. And so what happened was this girl had come over to his place and he's trying to tell her about me. And of course the devil likes to speak, you know, through people. And she said, well, if she really loved you, she'd be here for you now.
Wow.
And so that was a situation that happened right before we got married. And so even more so, like when he told me, he's in tears, oh my gosh, this is what happened. You know, how are you going to forgive me? How are we going to move forward? How is God going to use us? And even in that point, I talk about it in the book, it's like, you know what? I knew God was saying, forgive him, you know, move forward. You know, that's not his character. And so I forgave him, knowing like, okay, this is bigger than me. But it also set a tone. There were so many little things of God that he was saying, life is not about you. But the devil used that also to say, it's not about you. And so you know this, it's where we suppress, we completely deny ourselves. And so it's like God was using that in his way to keep me, that it's about me, it's about my identity. But the devil was using that same line to go, yeah, just, you're nothing. It's not about you. So it was super interesting.
Wow. That is. Yeah, just thinking of like how twisted it gets. And it's really confusing and hard to discern and recognize like what's true, because the messages can be the same. But then where it's coming from, there's always like that additional element that manipulates and twists things towards untruth. So yeah, wow. Thank you for sharing that, because that's such a great example of what that looks like. Yeah. And so thinking about when you were in Green Bay and you jump into the midst of the NFL craziness and living that life, in one of the chapters you talked about the pressure. I mean, it's all kind of wrapped up in this identity loss, right? And so much of that happens from feeling pressure, like this pressure to look a certain way, play a part, play a role, where you kind of hide and strip away who you actually are. If you could talk a little bit more about what that pressure felt like in the day-to-day, I would love to hear more on that topic.
Yeah, you know, when I saw this question, I was like, like, how do I answer that? And, you know, it's weird. It's like, I know that they were in seasons, and I don't even know if I would define it for me as like pressure. Certain places for sure pressure, and certain places where they're just like, whether it's stress or just uncertainty. So pressure came for sure right when we got married. So there was the pressure of him. So he was on a sack streak. So in the first 4 games, he had 9 sacks. And so we got married right after that. So there was a pressure of, oh, he's getting married. Is this going to mess things up for him as a player? And
Wow.
so I felt that for sure, that wow, because he didn't get a sack the week that we got married, he didn't get a sack. And so I was like, oh, what's going on here? And so I felt this pressure that there literally was a call from an anonymous call after the game that your marriage and this woman is to your demise. And so,
Wow.
yeah, so talk about pressure in that sense, like, oh my gosh, like because of me, now he's not going to do as well. There was pressure in that sense. There was pressure, by like people that didn't know me, understandably. So I say this with mercy and grace that, his family, his mom, she thought I was a gold digger. She didn't know me. So there was this pressure that I had to be this perfect wife, for them. And so those were the pressure points. I say on a day-to-day, I felt like who am I now? Like, what do I do with my time? Who am I? And how does that look? And so, different phases, I found myself just, thinking, okay, life isn't about me. It's not about me. It's about him. And I just, it just wasn't, I don't know if it was pressure. It was like a slow fade. And I probably didn't even notice it, or like I wasn't aware. I remember going to church one time early on, and this pastor's wife came up to me and she said, "You look so sad." And it was so weird because at the time I'm like, what are you talking about? But she already saw it, because just going from socializing every day with all these athletes to literally knowing no one in this duplex, where in Green Bay a lot of it was dark, there was not a lot of lighting, and so I'm sure I just like lost my voice, just like I said, slow fade. It was just so subtle. And so I don't know, I didn't even like feel like there was a pressure. It was just a transition, and I don't know, it's hard to describe actually.
I feel like you described it so beautifully, because I think initially there's the external pressure people think of, from like the cars you drive, the house you live in, and wearing designer everything. But so much more of it is invisible. And it's the pressure of like, how are you affecting their performance? Because that is the highest priority, right? So like, and that's where I too found I lost my voice, and because we've talked about this, but having the anonymous call like you have, and then I was struggling through like very debilitating depression, and for like a year and a half before I ever said anything. And it wasn't until I started having suicidal ideations that I was like scared enough to be like, I have to speak up. But because of the pressure from family and other people to be like, no, don't bother him with this. So it's just the suffering and silence. And you learn you can't, like, from other people, there's this invisible pressure to be silent, to not share, to hide, like to hide your struggles, your pain, and what you're going through, because it's like everything's about their visible performance and how that affects the team and trying to keep people happy and make the peace,
Yeah, for sure. And it's the way that the devil would whisper in your ears, you don't matter as much as he does. And I'm not, we're not like bashing, like but it is a subtle thing to where you just feel like, okay, what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, it doesn't matter. It's like, I just have to keep this to myself. So, I handled, you talked about the depression piece. I handled it differently, like hiding in different ways. Like in my book, it's numbing it. It was shopping. It was hiding. I mean, of course I love my kids, but I know that there was, for me, I think the way that I would dodge pressure is hiding behind my kids. Like we would be at church or we would be somewhere, and I would just be completely focused on them, so I didn't have to talk as much. I felt that when it came to our faith, something in me, because I knew that, like, not that I was totally an extrovert, but I knew I shared my faith. I loved sharing my faith. But when I got there, I felt like because he was so vocal about it, that I was just stay in the background. So maybe that was why I didn't feel pressured, because I just felt like, oh, it's not about me anymore, and I can just do my own thing. And so I just felt that, I just had no voice, and it was just, all right, this is my safe place. Let me just stick with the kids. Let me breastfeed in the corner, And so I kind of just dodged all that for a long period of time.
Yes. And then in doing that, it gets to feel comfortable and familiar, even though you're withering away. Like, and I love what you said about how it happens slowly, because I think that is the case for majority of people. Like, it is a slow fade. This doesn't typically happen at once, even though all the circumstances happen at once. Like the losing your voice and the lie. And I just want to point that out, because that is, I think, a very common lie. And when you spoke to that, it so resonated with me, because that has been a huge lie that the enemy has convinced me of over the years, is I don't matter as much, which is why I wouldn't speak up. And it's like, nope, he matters more. So, and realizing the truth is that we both matter equally. We both matter just as much. And like and because of the way our culture is and the way that like the system gets set up and the way we operate as humans, right? It's always this like categorical hierarchy. And so it's really easy to feel that from other people in the sense of status and like, well, because you have this public spotlight career, your husband matters more, you're down here. And God's like, absolutely not. That's actually the complete opposite of how his kingdom works.
Yes.
And so I know for me, it's been the past few years of really coming after that lie that the enemy's convinced me of and saying like, this needs to be uprooted so that I can grow and believing my value and worth, and this last little piece I want to share on that is last year I was at this event for current and former pro athletes' wives. And I remember talking to this one lady, and her husband retired, I don't know, 5+ years ago. And she had been like starting to speak, and she has her own podcast and doing this. And I remember talking to her about that. And she said the biggest hurdle for her in stepping out and doing that was feeling so unworthy. And so this issue of worth is, I think, a huge, huge one that most women, most wives of pro athletes experience. You talked a little bit about like the shrinking and silencing with who you really were and like, kind of hiding behind the gates, which I think that is so helpful to hear because it's so easy to do. How would you say that all of this impacted your faith or sense of identity at that time?
At that time, like I said, I felt, so when we came into this marriage, I was a Christian a lot longer. And so, like I said, he got saved when he was in Green Bay. And I remember thinking, Lord, like, how is he supposed to lead? Like he's supposed to, the whole unequally yoked and, get saved. But I'm like, I know that I know more. And I remember feeling like my growth was stunted and his was accelerating. And at the time it was like, okay, this is good, because he was gaining biblical knowledge. He was out like kind of front and center sharing his faith. And so there was the subtle thing of knowing this is supposed to take place. And my job is just to encourage him as a man to keep saying, hey, you, like, cause he was doubtful. He's like, how can I lead you? How can I lead this family? And my job, and I knew it then, it was for me to encourage him, for me to keep telling him, like, I believe in you, you can do this. And so God, like, I felt like it was like my growth was like this and his growth was like boom. But there was a place where I had lost that. It was just that place. It's like, well, because we're supposed to keep growing, we're supposed to be in different seasons. And so it took a while for me to just realize, like, God's not done with me. It doesn't mean I just stay there. And so I really had to like wrestle with that. I really had to get my footing with establishing my identity and like finding out, like, okay, who else am I? Like, Lord, is this what I meant for? And I talk about this very openly about seasons, because I remember it was actually another player and another Packer, where I would say things like, I'm just a mom. And he'd go, don't ever say that. Like, there's so much in that. And so when I talk now, I am so not disagreeing with that, because, oh my gosh, being a mom, there's so much honor, especially now after all that I've gone through and seeing what he's done with me now. It's like, there's no doubt, like, the biggest honor is being wife and mom. But to think that that's all that we are, there's so much that someone is not going to receive. If I just kept quiet about what I had gone through and I just stayed focused on, I'm just supposed to be wife and mom, and I literally was told I'm supposed to just cook, clean, and have babies. That's the only thing, because of that was the cult situation. If I kept hidden, or if I kept that quiet, you wouldn't feel, I mean, God would have used someone else, but God used the things that I've gone through to help other women. That's what he does. God says, I'm going to comfort you in your affliction so that you can comfort other people. And so if we were to keep quiet and just think, nope, our only place is just a home, then the whole body of Christ is out. So
that is, yes, gosh, that is so good. And it's so true, because I think we get stuck in roles, right? And roles are changing. Like, we can be a wife one day and then we cannot be a wife the next, same with mom, same with any roles with jobs or anything. And so to be able to see, like, those actually aren't where we find our identity. Like, it's beyond that. It's like, more than a wife, more than a mom. Like, those are roles that we play, but they don't get to define who we are. I love that you shared that. So thank you, because I think that clarifies a lot more of this topic of identity, which can be so elusive. It's very hard to name. It's hard to be clear on what this actually is. So yeah, I am so glad that you were able to speak to that. Okay, so clearly this conversation needed more than one episode. Eileen's story is layered, honest, and so needed. So we're picking it back up in part 2. That's where we dive deeper into identity, healing, and what it really looks like to rebuild after the game. I'll see you there.